All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are going to tackle one of the most important promises in all of cloud computing. I'm talking about the service level agreement, or as you probably know it, the SLA. When you sign up for a cloud service, what are you really getting? It's not just space on a server or access to an app, right? At its core, there's a promise, a guarantee of service, and that's what we're diving into today.
All right, first things first. What exactly is a cloud SLA? Let's break it down.
Okay, think of it like this. An SLA is basically a formal contract. It's the handshake agreement written down between you and your cloud provider. This is what builds trust. It takes you from just hoping the service stays up to having a rock-solid, binding promise. It clearly spells out what they guarantee, how they're going to measure it, and maybe most importantly, what happens if they don't deliver. So what's really cool is that SLAs aren't just one size fits all. They generally come in two main flavors. On one hand, you've got your metric-based SLAs. These are all about the hard numbers. Things like uptime percentage, CPU availability, response latency, stuff you can measure with a stopwatch. On the other hand, you have policy-based SLAs. These focus on the rules. We're talking about things like data residency, where your data is legally allowed to live, or backup policies and security compliance. Honestly, the best SLAs are a mix of both. Okay, that's the theory. But how does this actually work in the real world? Let's put a guarantee to the test and run some numbers. So let's imagine a scenario. Your provider guarantees 99% availability over a 30-day period. But during that month, the service went down for a total of 10.75 hours. The big question is, did they break their promise? Was the SLA actually violated? Let's find out. It's actually a pretty straightforward four-step process. First, we got to figure out the total service time that was promised. Then, we'll calculate the actual uptime by subtracting those pesky outages. Step 3 is to turn that into an availability percentage. And finally, the moment of truth. We compare our number to their guarantee. And after we crunch all those numbers, what do we get? The actual availability was only 96.92%. Well, there you have it. The verdict is in. Since 96.92% is definitely less than the 99% they promised, yep, that is an official SLA violation, no doubt about it. So they violated the SLA. Now what? This is where it gets interesting. What's the price of failure? Let's talk about the money. Okay, check out this next scenario. Here, the service costs you $50 a day. The SLA is pretty specific. It guarantees 99.95% uptime. But, and this is key, there are penalties. If the availability dips below 99%, you get a 25% credit. So, let's say you had 9 hours and 25 minutes of total downtime. What happens to your bill? The process here is pretty similar to the last one. We'll start by calculating the total cost for the month. Then we figure out the real availability percentage with that downtime. Once we have that number, we can check the SLA to see which penalty, if any, gets triggered. And finally, we calculate the credit and see what the final bill looks like. After doing the math, that 25% service credit comes out to $375. That brings the $1,500 bill all the way down to just $1,125. And that right there is how it's supposed to work. Your final payable amount is lower because the provider didn't hold up their end of the bargain. This is what we mean when we talk about an SLA having teeth. It's how you hold providers accountable. Okay, so these simple examples are great for understanding the mechanics. But what happens when you're looking at a real-deal commercial SLA? The kind with pages and pages of fine print. When you're digging into one of those, there are a few key terms you absolutely have to find. Things like, what's the applicable monthly period they're even measuring? How do they define downtime? Is it any little blip or only major errors? What about external connectivity? And of course, what are the exclusions? You got to know what they don't cover because that's usually where the surprises are. And here's something really important to remember. Not all hours are created equal in the world of SLAs. A provider might have much stricter requirements for your peak business hours, say 9 to 5, than they do for the middle of the night. This makes sense, right? An outage at peak time is way more damaging, so the guarantees are often higher during those critical windows. Okay, so to bring this all home, let's go through a quick checklist. This is what you should use to evaluate any cloud SLA before you sign anything. You really want to walk through these steps. First, identify all the actors. Who's the provider, the consumer, any brokers? Second, evaluate the policies on things like data residency. Third, define those metrics really clearly. 4, Review the security guarantees. 5. Check how they handle service management, like provisioning and scaling. And finally, and I can't stress this enough, find the exit clause. What's the plan for a total failure? What's the disaster recovery plan? And how do you terminate the contract? A good SLA always has a clear way out.
So at the end of the day, here's what it all comes down to. You now know how to read an SLA. The big question is, does yours truly protect you? It's about so much more than just an uptime percentage. It's your technical, financial, and legal safety net in the cloud. Take a look at your current agreements. Are you really as covered as you think you are?